Welcome to The Wave. We are Voices of Ecology, a movement powered by the European Union Erasmus Plus program. WAVE brings youth voices to the forefront, from real-life interviews with youth in the eco-village movement to exploring degrowth and youth perspectives on intergenerational fairness. We're a multi-host podcast where each episode is unique and is hosted by a different WAVE participant. With a rotating format, a diversity of voices, perspectives, and passions, WAVE brings them all to the mic. Join us as we dive into bold conversations, share inspiring stories, and explore how we can all live more sustainably.
And it goes to the question, is there any tangible examples of policies that could be classified as beyond growth, maybe in a way or another way?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I would say that there's actually a lot of policies that could be classified as beyond growth because they ultimately support sustainable and inclusive well-being goals. And they range from more targeted or local policies like, let's say, supporting cycling or other forms of sustainable transportation, to really overarching policies like well-being budgets or working time reduction. We actually have a website called sustainableprosperity.eu, and there we have a database with hundreds of examples. Many of them actually have been implemented. So even on this website, you can find case studies linked to these policies. For instance, we have case studies linked to high inheritance tax or universal basic services. I would say that the main problem, though, is that they are frequently not part of a more overarching overhaul of the of the way we envision progress. It's not kind of a wider program, and to achieve change, I think we really need to be more systematic and more systemic. But still, these policies are a great way to start.
I didn't know all of that exists. It's very nice to know. And also, again, we will also share the link to this website because it's a mine of super nice resources, and it's really good to have these. So thank you. So it is really a work in progress, if I understand well. And it goes again to the next questions, maybe a bit repetitive. So tell me if it is or if it is not. But what is currently happening around the idea of beyond growth in the policy space? I know when we met last time, you mentioned some international debates, conferences that are happening right now, and things are moving, I think. And yeah, I wanted to know a bit more about that. And how is the Beyond Growth movement supporting ambitious environmental or social policy designs?
Yeah. Well, actually, there's a lot going on right now. So I would say at the EU level, we had some important breakthroughs a few years ago when several members of the European Parliament, together with civil society partners and also other organizations like Zoe Institute, hosted the Beyond Growth conference in 2023. And after that, the agenda has lost maybe some visibility, but there are still very promising entry points in some of the files that are currently under discussion. For instance, the intergenerational fairness strategy that is going to be unveiled soon. There are also important references to supporting sustainable and inclusive well-being as part of the European social model in the 2025 strategic foresight report. So there is still a lot of momentum or interest around sustainable and inclusive well-being. But I would say that a lot of the most exciting and potentially very life-changing things are happening at the UN level. And I would like to mention maybe 3 things that are happening right now in case people want to follow those developments. So first of all, I'd like to mention the United Nations High-Level Expert Group on Beyond GDP. So this was set up in May 2025 when the UN Secretary General appointed 14 scholars and practitioners from diverse disciplines, regions, and backgrounds to this high-level expert group. And what the group is trying to do is to develop actually a concise dashboard of Beyond GDP indicators, focusing on a limited number of domains that can help tracking progress more holistically, but also remaining manageable, which is one of the issues that the SDG kind of indicator framework had with this over 200 indicators. This group also actually presented an interim report not long ago and will issue their final recommendations soon, but then there is still a long road because these are just recommendations. Then countries need to discuss these recommendations and decide how to implement it. So still a long process in the future, but there are some interesting developments that people who are interested on the topic should keep an eye on. Then I would like to also highlight the Beyond GDP Global Alliance. This was launched last summer at the Finance for Development conference. This is led by Spain together with OECD, SEGIV, and UNCTAD, and brings together countries, but also other partners that share a commitment to integrating beyond GDP metrics into financing policies and frameworks. So a bit more targeted in a way than the other process, but still looking at something extremely important as financing policies and frameworks. So also something to keep an eye on. And last but not least, I like to highlight the process led by the UN Special Rapporteur on Extreme Poverty and Human Rights. He has launched an 18-month initiative to develop a roadmap for eradicating poverty beyond growth. The idea is to really challenge traditional poverty reduction strategies that typically are, okay, you need to increase GDP and then redistribute, and really offer a practical blueprint for action that offers a more transformative way of thinking about eradicating poverty or fighting poverty. And this roadmap will be presented at the Human Rights Council mid this year and will provide a comprehensive catalog of policy measures covering all areas from social protections, trade, taxation, and so on. So yeah, a lot of things going on and a lot of exciting and promising things happening, hopefully even this year.
Oh, wow, super. It's good to know. Nice. It's very nice. Thank you. As always, we will also share the links to all of these. And it gets me to the question that how it's very nice that all of these are happening at a more global level and also involving countries. And it gets me to think about how are countries been dealing with these approaches, and how could a Beyond Growth vision be concretely implemented in a more reduced area, like a country or even at an individual level, and also in businesses. For example, how would Beyond Growth vision transform industries like energy, transport, digital technology, for example?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's an excellent question and one that we typically hear because people, of course, want to understand better, okay, how these amazing ideas actually translate into something that we can operationalize or do. So I would say that first of all, like the first step is getting better tools to understand how people actually live, right? We have some of them, but we really need to apply them to understand, are people living healthy, happy, secure lives? Is this true for everyone or is it only for a privileged few? And crucially, will our children and grandchildren and other generations inherit the same opportunities, or are we compromising their future? So we need to understand like the diagnosis. Second, when decisions are made, and in whatever level this may happen, could be a local level, national level, whatever, the guiding question should be, how will this impact sustainable and inclusive well-being? Because what we need to keep in mind is that growth is never an end goal. Well-being is. So we need to put that at the center of our thinking and for our designing policy. And then we also need to rethink again how we judge success. So instead of saying, okay, did this policy that we applied led to increase in GDP, we actually should ask, did this policy improve people's lives? Are people living more fairly and more sustainably than before? Did it reduce inequality or strengthen social cohesion or protected the environment? So really changing the lens that we use to think about this. And of course, if we succeed and if implemented, a Beyond Growth vision really would change and transform our economies, including the productive structure, which will look certainly different from what we see today. I would say that some of the changes that we could see are the care economy becoming much more prominent, with social services, health, education being emphasized because given their direct contribution to people's well-being. And in industries, we would see more emphasis on those sectors that allow us to produce more sustainably, even if in the short term these are less, and I'm making air quotes here for the listeners, productive. So, and likewise, we would also see more targeted and coordinated planning of the productive processes, which in turn would allow for a better and more responsible use of resources.
Thank you so much. Again, a really nice answer. And yeah, I hope I can see this vision in the future. And it goes to the next part of our next and last part of our podcast today. That is about challenges and future. And I think future is really a keyword here in our discussion. future for ourselves, but also for our environment and for the future generations. And it goes to the challenges that we will face and that we are currently facing. And the first question that I will have is how does Beyond Growth address power asymmetries between gender, between classes, between regions, etc.? And what resistance does Beyond Growth face from political and economic elites right now?
Yeah. Well, if there is radical change in our economic system, one that entails the necessary redistribution of income and wealth, and as well as a restructuring of the productive sphere that alters, I would say, the relative weight of different industries, it follows that those who have enjoyed power because of their income or their wealth or their position within specific sectors will inevitably have to give up some power. And I would also expect significant changes in international inequalities, with countries also in the global north taking responsibility for past emissions and also ending harmful practices like supporting extractive industries and outsourcing of environmental and social cost of their production processes to poorer countries. Now, in my work, I would say that I have encountered two types of resistance. So first of all, logically, of course, powerful elites will be resisting because those who are benefiting from their current position in the existing economic system will resist any change that could jeopardize such position. But to be honest, more than resistance, what I have faced is disinformation and deeply entrenched narratives that constrain our ability to imagine a different way of living, a different way of organizing our economies. What I've seen is that there is frequently a misunderstanding of some of the proposals that come from the Beyond Growth field. Proposals that are very well studied, that are backed by science, are often still disregarded as utopian or unrealistic without sufficient consideration. So I would say that resistance actually comes more from disinformation than anything.
Yeah, it goes also with questions about narratives and how to get out of our way of thinking and of the paradigm that we are in, and how to imagine something that is different. And I understand that it can be hard, but yeah, it's very nice to have these discussions and to still push for it and to still hope and to still see that these things are possible. Very, very interesting. And then you think when you see a narrative that you feel like you want to go towards and that you feel that you want to take action to develop, it goes to the next question, that is, how can we take action, and what cultural or narrative shifts are needed for Beyond Growth to gain broader acceptance? And are there any movements in Europe or elsewhere that would embody this mindset? And where can citizens, especially the young people that we are talking to, engage or mobilize around these ideas?
Yep. So all great questions. Let's start with the narrative and cultural shifts. So I would say that at a macro level, the idea that economic growth is inherently good is really deeply entrenched in the way we think. And that is something that will need to change if we aim to do profound and systemic transformations in the way we organize our economies. So there is no doubt that this is a really important narrative shift that needs to happen. At a more individual level, I would say that, and particularly in the global north, there is still a great deal of kind of cultural shifts that need to happen and work to be done around consumerism, around overconsumption. On a more positive note, and this is not a scientific observation because it's not my area of research, but I felt, and maybe again, this is my personal algorithmic bubble, but I really felt that there is this growing sense of fatigue with influencers promoting endless shopping hauls and low quality fast fashion in other similar patterns of excessive consumption. And what I've seen, again, this is purely anecdotal, but in my own social network is these kind of emerging trends with people committing to low buy or no buy years and engaging in project pan as a way of addressing years of overconsumption. So there are some like individual, or at least again, I'm seeing some individual shift. What puzzles me still is that, this individual behavior changes, sometimes I feel that they are a bit disconnected with corresponding political action. So what I do hope to still see in the future is seeing this kind of importance given to some of these considerations translating into collective organizing, voting patterns, and also policy, right? And you asked about like movements that might embody this mindset. There are so many. I mean, I could mention Well-Being Economy Alliance, Fridays for Future, Campaign of Campaigns, the Youth Moving Beyond GDP, and so on. These include beyond growth specific focus organizations, but also other like-minded, like friends using other frameworks like rights-based economies and feminist economies. And yeah, maybe just to wrap up, I'm thinking about, okay, what can people do from their end? So I would say, first of all, try to be informed and keep yourself informed. I think that sometimes these really important news don't make it to the headlines of mainstream media. So keep listening to podcasts like this one. You're doing already a great job here. Or also you can follow like projects like Wise Horizons, Merge, Maps that regularly share updates of what is happening in the field. Second, talk to people and organize yourself. From our experience, building support for new ideas and approaches really happens in small groups, in communities. So you can all play a crucial role in here, like explaining what you have read, what is concerning you, or those kind of things. And lastly, maybe this is kind of like a bit more related to my ongoing work and can bring kind of a new perspective, which is that many of the processes that I mentioned at EU level and UN level actually hold regular consultation opportunities, public requests for feedback from individuals and organizations. And from my perspective, it is really important to have youth and young voices well represented. So I would encourage everyone to keep an eye on Have Your Say or other consultation portals. And if you see something on a topic that you wrote your dissertation about or that you've been working on, maybe consider sharing what you learn in those process and adding your voice to this consultation and maybe high-level processes.
Thank you so much. I think this is a very nice key message to have, and also a lot of things to think about and a lot of things to do. So it's great.
Yeah, you have homework.
We have homework. Oh, wow. You almost already answered all the last questions that I had about the future perspectives. Just maybe to add a little bit, to have a broader vision. What would a society that is guided by Beyond Growth look like if we really go into the everything is possible, we have hope and it will work out? How would it look like in 20 or 30 years, maybe?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question and one that we often tend to kind of forget when we do our day-to-day works. I am very fortunate that when I started working at Zoe Institute very soon after it started, I had to host co-created lab for our Wise Horizons project. And in this lab, we collectively imagined actually how 2050 would look like if there are societal goals of well-being, inclusion, sustainability, and economic justice were a reality. What I will share here, maybe it's deeply inspired by those conversations. So it's not only my vision, but something that came up after a conversation and iteration with people from very diverse backgrounds. And in my mind, when I think about a different 2050, in this future, people would work fewer hours. They would enjoy more time with family, friends, and leisure. This could look like having, let's say, a 3-day work week complemented with a 1-day community service scheme that would really facilitate a very work-life balance, but also keep community engagement live. I imagine a more fairer distribution of income through strong minimum wage policies, but also having predistributive policies and wealth and inherent taxation that could help us fund adequate living standards and universal basic services for all. I imagine innovation and infrastructure available to everyone, regardless of where they live, a more equitable way of working across regions, maybe last but not least, a daily life that really is grounded on bright, vibrant communities where people can really reconnect and support each other.
It sounds amazing. It sounds like the society I want to live in, for sure.
You're invited.
Yeah, I hope I will. And there's only 2 questions left. And the first is, you already answered a little, but it's about hope. And what gives you hope that this is possible?
Well, what gives me hope is knowing that although many of these topics might not make the top headlines on mainstream media, people still care deeply about them. We have seen them repeatedly in the Eurobarometer surveys. We have done a survey with our merged colleagues, led by our colleagues at the University of Ghent. And we've seen that most people, when asked, they really support policy oriented toward diminishing greenhouse gas emissions. They care about climate change. They support beyond GDP measures. So I'm hopeful that there is wide support for delivering a word as the one that I just described.
Thank you. And last but not least question, what is one key message that listeners should take away from this whole conversation? Which key message would it be?
Yeah, well, it's hard to summarize in one key message, but I would say that first, that an economic system designed for sustainable and inclusive well-being is very much possible, that a lot of people are working actively on better tools, including models and also metrics to reorient our economies to support these goals, that it can be done, and the next step is to really push these ideas into economic policy, and that for that we need forward-thinking politicians and also governments, but also public support of people really reclaiming and asking for change.
Super. Thank you so much, Magalí, for your conversation today. Do you want to add something else that we maybe didn't discuss or try to the questions?
I think that was very thorough, but thank you again for having me. It was always a pleasure to be able to share about my work, and I do hope that you find some of these things interesting and relevant for your own thinking.
Definitely. It was very interesting. And to have the little outro speak, I can say that this was Magalí Brosio, economist at the Zoe Institute. So thank you again, Magalí, for sharing your insights. And if you'd like to follow her work, you can find the link to the website that we'll put in the description, as well as all the links that we talked about in this podcast. In her website, you will find publication, doctoral thesis, and all additional contents in video formats. All very. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to the WAVE podcast. We are voices of ecology. If you're inspired to act, share, and learn, connect with us, then follow us on Instagram at WAVE Project EU and share the episode with another person today. Every bit keeps the wave moving forward.